We're covering system-dependent recovery on small appliances for your EPA 608 Type 1 exam, specifically focusing on the 80% recovery standard. System-dependent or passive recovery is a method where you use the appliance's own compressor and the internal pressure of the system to push refrigerant into a recovery cylinder. The most critical point to remember for the exam is that this method is only legal for small appliances, which the EPA defines as factory-sealed systems containing 5 pounds or less of refrigerant. An exam question might try to trick you by describing a passive recovery setup on a larger residential unit. This is always an illegal procedure. Passive recovery cannot be used on systems with more than 15 pounds of refrigerant. For small appliances, the EPA sets 2 different recovery efficiency standards, and you will absolutely be tested on this. If the appliance's compressor is operational, you must recover 90% of the refrigerant. However, if the compressor is inoperative or burned out, the standard is 80%. Let's focus on an exam-style scenario for the 80% rule. Imagine you are servicing a small window air conditioner with a non-functional compressor. The nameplate indicates a charge of 3 pounds of R22. To be compliant, you must recover at least 80% of that charge, which would be 2.4 pounds. The reason the requirement is lower for a dead compressor is because refrigerant gets trapped in the compressor oil and is much harder to remove without the compressor's help. To achieve this 80% recovery, you can't just hook up a hose. The exam expects you to know the techniques to release this trapped refrigerant. This often involves gently warming the compressor with a heat gun to vaporize the refrigerant out of the oil. A huge safety and exam point is that you must never use an open flame like a torch to heat the compressor. Another technique is to use a vacuum pump to lower the pressure in the system, which also helps the trapped refrigerant boil off. When the compressor is inoperative, you will likely need to install access fittings on both the high and low sides of the system to ensure you can pull out the required amount. A common point of confusion on the exam is mixing up the 80% recovery efficiency with the 80% cylinder fill limit. Remember, 80% efficiency is about getting refrigerant out of the appliance. The 80% fill limit is a safety measure to prevent your recovery tank from exploding due to hydrostatic pressure. The exam will test this distinction. As a mental shortcut, remember this. If the compressor is dead, it can't give its full effort. It can't even give 90%. The best it can do is a B-grade 80%. This links the inoperative compressor directly to the lower recovery requirement. Finally, always use a Department of Transportation or DOT-approved recovery cylinder and ensure it has been evacuated to 0 psig or a deep vacuum before you begin the recovery process. If for some reason you cannot measure the percentage of refrigerant recovered, you can also comply by evacuating the small appliance to a vacuum of 4 inches of mercury. For free practice questions, AI-powered explanations, and more exam prep tools, visit openexamprep.com. That's openexamprep, all one word, .com.